Picture it. Nuclear Armageddon. The death of billions. The end of human civilization as we know it, and perhaps an extinction-level event. The atmosphere saturated with radioactive soil and nuclear fallout, blocking out the sun while killing all life on Earth, save that of the cockroaches and the desperate holdouts clinging to the remnants of civilization in shelters, where the brutal capitalist oligarchs controlling our world go to space via same-day shipping or by promoting crypto scams on podcasts, and all the while they are funding horrific, twisted experiments in those shelters to further their twisted scientific and political goals. Pretty fun, right? And it comes complete with a cute mascot symbolizing our inevitable triumph over the Red Menace. We even get the latest gadgets from those shiny white stalls in the mall that come with a complete album of 50s class. Wait a minute. Hang on. God damn it, I'm getting an incoming cease and desist from Todd Howard. It just works. If only I had some sort of shield to protect me from people spying on what I'm doing, like those dang filthy commies. Wait. I know, I've got it! We shall defeat the evil empire by indulging in some good old-fashioned patriotic capitalism. Cue the sponsor. This video is sponsored by Atlas VPN, who right now are running a huge discount, meaning you can get a 3-year subscription for just $1.99 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's easily the best deal on the market right now, but time is running out on this offer, so here is why you should take advantage of it. Atlas VPN offers you security on your browsing. It can route you through a number of servers, a server of your choosing in fact, across countless locations all over the world, letting you move securely across the internet. It even has a built-in security system that blocks malware, adware, and tracking software, keeping you safe while browsing. And if that isn't enough, it even notifies you when someone is trying to steal your data as well. Your safety online is their priority. And that ability to choose a server in a multitude of countries has an added benefit. Most streaming services these days have region locking features due to licensing. Trust me, I'm an anime fan, this is exceptionally painful for me. Anime licensing is hell. But with Atlas VPN, I, and therefore you, can access that content in any of their server regions. And what's more, they provide this service for you on an unlimited number of devices, meaning that you can enjoy these features anywhere, anytime. Though, as an Australian, the best part for me personally is Atlas's excellent speeds. Believe me guys, every megabyte counts down here. As does every dollar, as different products cost different amounts in different places, and Atlas VPN can help you take advantage of those local deals too. There is a ton of utility in this product, guys. As I've said before, Atlas VPN is running a huge discount, meaning you can get a 3-year subscription for just $1.99 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Time is running out though, as I said before, so click this link in the video description below to take advantage of this excellent deal. Anyway, on to the video. Anyway, yes, nuclear war. A perfectly wholesome and hilarious discussion to have, at least when you are a dark, humid, existentially terrified millennial or zoomer. From the 1950s to the present day, the threat of thermonuclear annihilation of all life on Earth has not been the realm of science fiction, but rather a geopolitical fact. And I use the term geopolitical very deliberately because, as we have seen throughout history, the use of nuclear weapons, such as those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and their threatened use, such as the Cuban Missile Crisis and, well, now, have all been political statements to further strategic, economical, political goals, rather than achieving a tactical or strategic military objective. Nuclear weapons are the ultimate stick in big stick diplomacy. They ensure the safety of your sovereignty against foreign powers, while simultaneously acting as a political boogeyman you can show off at parades to compensate for your hilariously small air force. Simply put, they are used to deter attacks against you, while exerting political pressure on non-nuclear powers around you. And seeing as Finland just applied to join NATO, oh boy, we are gonna see some wang waving. Anyway, once again, before this video starts, I'm going to refer you to the excellent work of my YouTube colleague and countryman Perun for his video regarding the nitty-gritty background on all of the material and political details of Russia's nuclear arsenal. But, like any good analyst, he makes a bunch of conclusions without fully committing to any single one of them, save that of, come on guys, it's not going to happen. And he does this because he's a professional. He knows that in the world of analysis, he can't guarantee anything, and if he's wrong on that guarantee that it won't happen, None of us are going to be alive to tell him that he was wrong in the first place. Me, on the other hand, I'm a historian and a wargamer who can't afford his degree trying to make his living on the internet, so what I'm going to do is talk about what will actually go down should the unthinkable occur, how it will play out, and why. Full disclosure, I'm drawing a lot of my information on the only complete academic study I could readily find. It was written in 2001, which I've tried to augment with current data and weapon systems. But essentially, nuclear war plans, targets, and procedures that we know of are out of date anyway for obvious security reasons. TLDR, when I went digging through the current declassified documents, 80% of the stuff related to the nuclear war strategy was redacted under the 30 to 50 year rules, and the rest of it was permanently sealed, with none of us mere mortals ever going to see any of it. But, thankfully, given my background in upholding Posada Toja's thought, those of you in the comments who get that joke, I salute you. Nuclear war has been a study hobby of mine for a while, and you should have seen the hours I logged in DEF CON back in the pre-Steam Dark Ages. I even have it on CD on the rack behind me. And, of course, that game will be doubling as B-roll in this video because, come on, that's a wonderfully existentially terrifying experience playing that game. Polygon made a video about it. Anyway, enough rambling. Let us push the proverbial big red button and start with how nuclear war works.
When you hear the missile whistle, you gotta roll and rock. When you hear the missile whistle, you gotta roll and rock. Come on, baby, everyone doing the bam-bam.
The weirdest thing about nuclear war is it's two people playing the same game with completely different rules, and it entirely depends on who moves first. Imagine a game of chess where the white pieces move first and obliterate world civilization. You know, there's a joke in there somewhere. And the black pieces now have to decide if it's better to destroy the king and queen so they can't organize, destroy the rooks and the knights to prevent a follow-up attack, or maybe if nuking the whole board, including their own pieces, is the best options, so no one wins at all, as an ultimate middle finger and an option to deter the player from attacking. The point is, unlike every other type of war where there's a multitude of strategies open to you, depending on this initial phase, your tactical and strategic options are limited to the singular dichotomy of whether you strike first or wait to retaliate. Now, given that Soviet and Russian plans are still heavily classified and, in Russian, we will go with the American plans for nuclear war. For the past 50 years, until 2003, the American nuclear war strategy, rather deliciously given all the conspiracy theorists around nowadays, was titled the Single Integrated Operational Plan, or the PSYOP for short. God damn it. And in an ironic way, the entire concept of nuclear arms, as we have established, is an actual political PSYOP, so it's doubly appropriate. These days, there is a dedicated successor nuclear war plan set up along the lines of the other US military operation plans. It's designated as a contingency plan, or CONPLAN 8044, which is, in reality, the successor to the PSYOP. But, for the sake of discussion, we're going to use the PSYOP model because they will still share a lot of the details and provide a general overview, and we have more information on them. Anyway, nuclear war planning has been an ongoing developmental procedure for the deployment of US strategic forces, aka missiles, submarines, and bombers, aka the nuclear triad. Since the waning days of the Eisenhower White House, it was decided in 1960 that given America was no longer the sole bearer of nuclear arms to a significant degree, they would need organized and coordinated war plans in order to counter aggressive expansion from the Soviet Union should World War III begin. Originally, the American plan was simply fire the missiles and drop the bombs on literally every single installation in the Soviet Union. There was no rhyme nor reason to it other than the complete incineration of everything east of the Oder River, west of Seattle. And that would result in the needless death, in Eisenhower's mind, of millions, perhaps billions of people. However, as it turned out, by giving the nuclear strategy form, it didn't reduce that number of dead people, it simply gave the Pentagon a more streamlined method to kill even more, as well as justifying to Congress the enlargement of the nuclear arsenal. Arms procurement in the US never changes. Anyway, the first PSYOP came into effect in 1962 under the Kennedy administration, just in time for old mate Nikita Khrushchev to do a little trolling. The resulting fallout, Sorry. Yeah, the resulting fallout from this was the then Secretary of Defense, deadliest nerd since Oppenheimer, and twice voted America's sexiest war criminal, Robert McNamara, spoke to Congress to discuss revisions he had proposed to America's strategic posture regarding its nuclear weapons, stating that hitting nuclear forces in retaliation means striking empty silos. Any discussions of attacking said nuclear forces is, of course, a first strike policy. And publicly, the United States has always openly and publicly declared that it would never utilize nuclear weapons in a first strike. That being said, as stated at the beginning of this chapter, not striking first puts you at a serious disadvantage should war become unavoidable. It's like a game of chicken where flinching first actually means potentially winning, if winning even is the right word. So of course, both the US and Russia have options for both contingencies, attacking first or retaliating, and should defecation collide with oscillation, I have no doubt that all considerations would be on the table. But the upshot of McNamara's influence was that the US nuclear policy, as one primarily of deterrence, should be focused on the Soviet Union's war-making capabilities in general and the socio-economic structure supporting it, including its political leadership. Translated from politically correct bovine excrement, if we are retaliating, then the enemy has probably already fired its nukes, meaning that we should nuke their conventional forces while wiping out their economy, power stations, factories, mines, government buildings, etc. In short, the Soviet people. This remained in place until the Nixon administration requested a review on America's nuclear weapons capability in order to free up more tactical options for their employment. This involved the development of limited attack options in the hope of using nuclear arms in a tactical or theater role without triggering the apocalypse. Wishful thinking, but yeah. While also including the expansion of the US arsenal of tactical nuclear weapons, as well as the modernization of the strategic deterrent forces. This remained status quo for a while, until exploding onto the scene to make the Cold War go politically hot is, of course, the main man. Before Zelensky came along proving that an actor can be president, there was another. The Master. You know him. You love him. The all-American cowboy. From the silver screen to the name of a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. It's the one, the only, your boy, Ronald Reagan!
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Reagan spearheaded arms reductions talks with the Soviet Union and ostensibly changed things up a bit. But in reality, a massive arms build-up took place with a focus on protracted nuclear war. What? You mean to tell me that Reagan lied about arms reduction? Yeah, right. Next you'll tell me that trickle-down economics doesn't work. These included the development of SDI, or Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative, which was a missile defense laser system based in space. Didn't work, but it was a cool idea and it scared the living shit out of the Russians. The B-2 stealth bomber, an actual threat to the Soviets which could sneak past their radar, the various nuclear-capable cruise missiles such as the Tomahawk, and the deployment of the Ohio-class nuclear submarines with advanced Trident ballistic missiles. In short, the Reagan administration wanted to develop a reserve capability of nuclear arms while reducing the number of first strike weapons in order to reduce the chance of surprise attacks during high world tensions. This was all while striving to ensure that should a nuclear war take place, the United States would have the capability to survive the initial attack, destroy the Soviet warfighting capability, and then still have enough reserve weapons and conventional forces in order to, and I quote, force the adversary to negotiate terms in favor of the United States while preventing the resurgence of the foe as a world power. End quote. Basically, Reagan took Teddy Roosevelt's theory of speak softly but carry a big stick, and then added the following sentence, bring a second stick if you break the first one over his head. The US went from preventing a nuclear war to having the ability to win one, or at least trying to have it. Again, if winning is what you'd call it. And then, well, after all that hard work, the wall came down by itself. By accident. Followed by the end of the big bad guy itself. So, what now? Well, the US expanded its targeting folder from the 1960s, blew the dust off, and constructed Red 4, which involves Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, etc., with attack options for all of them individually or for all at once, aka full send. Though in a retaliatory scenario, it is most likely assumed that the US will strike all members of Red 4, given that a nuclear attack warning satellite from all parties will pick up the launch plumes in the missile fields, and as a result, they'll not have much time to work out whether it's an attack on them or somebody else, and thus becomes a free-for-all. Essentially, if one missile flies in any significant capacity, there goes the whole neighborhood. Anyway, after all of that, it brings us up to today. So what does all of this mean? Well, it means that the United States has a variety of tactical and strategic options for fighting a nuclear war with Russia, and the Russians almost certainly have one for fighting all of us in general. But ultimately, we all know that in the end, if one nuke goes off, that most likely means we'll all go for the whole ball game, and as such, we will discuss that scenario in detail. But I do just want to give a quick example of the limited exchange option. So technically, under the current incarnation of PSYOP, or Conplan 8044, which is still heavily classified by the way, we have a large number of contingencies for local and limited exchanges based on the geopolitical situation, and again, just to reiterate, all of them classified to hell and back. So what I'm going to put forward is just me theorizing or spitballing. For example, if China invades Taiwan and we don't have the conventional forces to stop them, the field commander may request authority to deploy a tactical nuclear weapon. He does, and he destroys the Chinese landing force. This leads to the Chinese launching a nuclear torpedo or an airburst cruise missile at the US task force, which of course destroys it. This is followed by intensified limited exchanges from stealth bombers and fighter aircraft, and basically things progress as a regional conflict, maybe escalating, maybe not. Now, if that situation goes completely south and it escalates totally, let's say Russia gets involved and they move on the Baltics in retaliation while stepping up operations in Ukraine. We now have World War III. So now that we are assuming that Feces and Fan are well and truly acquainted, in the World War III scenario, there are two major war plans that the United States can use, with 4 distinct tiers of each. The two major war plans are based around, as I said before, whether the US initiates a first strike, which is dubbed counter-force, while the other is if the US is retaliating to a WMD attack on itself, which is identified as counter-value. So let's start with the first one. Counter-force, as it says on the tin, is an attack on the Russian and Chinese nuclear capability, as well as their targeting of the conventional forces in the field and their major military bases. This would be the first strike option, where the US has taken the decision to use nuclear arms to destroy Red 4's nuclear capability before they're able to launch their missiles. This option would most likely involve extensive use of sub-launched nuclear missiles, air-launched cruise missiles, and short-range tactical weapons such as Tomahawks with nuclear tips. This is done in order to minimize reaction time, thereby minimizing the number of retaliatory strikes Blue Force, NATO and SEATO, will suffer. These strikes would be followed by a limited offensive with Minutemen ICBMs against critical targets, while maintaining a large reserve of weapons to influence future peace negotiations. Counter-value, on the other hand, as you can probably guess, is the United States' plan to respond to an attack by weapons of mass destruction on their soil, and it is proportionate in response to the attack. Now, assuming that the enemy is launching a full-scale counter-force attack on the US nuclear arsenal, they would initiate a full-scale counter-value strike on all currently active Red 4 targets. Essentially, the United States was forced into a position where they must use their missiles or lose them, and thus they will launch all of them at once. This will also most likely involve France and the UK deploying their weapons as well, as such an attack on the US will almost certainly involve a corresponding attack on NATO and SEATO due to the treaty obligations between member states. As mentioned before though, there are 4 main tiers to a nuclear strategy, which depend on the severity of the conflict and the strategic situation, and of course the forces on standby when it occurs. These are called the Massive Attack Options, or MAO. This shit writes itself.
Tactical assessment. Red Chinese victory. Impossible. Embrace democracy, or you will be eradicated. Let freedom ring.
Starting off, Mao 1 is a counterforce strike on the enemy's nuclear arsenal and strategic weapon systems, with the goal of minimizing civilian and political casualties, essentially tearing the teeth out of Russia and China so NATO's superior conventional forces can defeat them in the field, while still having nukes on hand to achieve the upper hand in the peace talks. Basically, surrender or we blast Beijing and Moscow. This target option is estimated to include between 800 to 1200 individual targets, with assigned warheads to each. Then, there is Mao 2, which includes all of the conventional forces in the target folders, as well as the nuclear forces. This includes around 3,000 targets, and of course involves, bomber bases, air bases in general with fighters and stuff based on them, military encampments, tank depots, that sort of thing. But, crucially, it leaves the leadership and the economic targets out to minimize civilian casualties again, and to allow for someone to negotiate with after the strikes are completed. After all, as satisfying as it would be, we can't negotiate peace with Putin if Putin and his cronies are dead. Mao 3, however, says f*** that noise, and hits the entire military and political structure. And Mao 4, as you can probably guess, is Alt F4. End program. Terminate process Russia.exe, and human civilization by extension. Needless to say, in every single one of these cases, unless Red 4 is taken completely by surprise or they are the initiators of the attack, this will almost certainly result in a total retaliation. And given that Russian and Chinese missiles tend to be inferior in guidance to Western weapons, they will almost certainly be assigned to counter-value target sets with targets big enough to hit, namely major population centers, or, even more specifically, you, the viewer. Congratulations, someone thinks you're important. Anyway, on to the fun part.
They're building an atom bomb, gonna blow me out of this place. They're building a bigger bomb, what a crazy human race. Let them kill us all and we'll stand and watch. Well, brother, that ain't for me. I'll be running and a jumping and a skipping and a bumping when they blow me to smithereens.
So how does a nuclear war play out? And how does it get fought? Well, the United States operates the aforementioned nuclear triad. This is comprised of air-launched weapons, either cruise missiles or gravity bombs, submarine-launched nuclear missiles. These are missiles launched from a submarine near the enemy's territory in order to minimize reaction time for an attack, and of course, strategic deterrent forces, silo-based missiles. The Russians, meanwhile, have all of these types too, as well as two more. Given the size of Russia and their general inferiority in technology, the Soviets had to resort to different strategies to ensure the survival of their nuclear deterrent. Their submarines were bigger and noisier than the American ones, and they had to go through the SOSUS net while passing Iceland to get to American shores. The SOSUS net was basically a sonar screen set up between Iceland, Greenland, and the UK that could detect any submarine moving through that axis. And of course, if there are American ships patrolling it, which there always were, the Soviets would get picked up, hunted down, and murdered. They'd never survive it. While Far Eastern Fleet submarines had it way worse. They would have to get past Japan from Vladivostok. And that was straight up a no-go due to the sheer amount of naval power in the area. And they had their own version of SOSUS around the islands there too. So, in response to this, to keep their nuclear deterrent safe, the Soviets developed road mobile and rail mobile ICBMs, which they can move around in their vast territory. This way they can maintain the deterrent in a similar way to the nuclear submarines, while remaining relatively undetected. The only downside to that, of course, is that they don't have the infrastructure that silos and submarines do. They're not as accurate or as precise, and of course they still require a readiness warning to be brought out of their garrison facilities, because these are high-tech weapon systems. You have to keep them in the garrison most of the time, so a surprise attack still renders them vulnerable, which is why anytime something goes slightly wrong, like it did with the start of the Ukrainian war, the Russians will raise their readiness posture and wave their wang around. And it's also why Putin has been pouring money into the strategic rocket forces, which we have seen is to the detriment of his conventional forces, as Russia doesn't have that much money in defense to go around. Anyway, just to break character for a bit, I will have a video touching base on the Ukraine situation later near the end of next month, hopefully, as the battle for Donbass plays out. But, if you want a good laugh and a quick update, The Russians have tried to cross the Donets River near the town of Bilarovka by building a pontoon bridge. And 3 times now, the Ukrainians have waited for them to finish the bridge, cross with all their troops, only to then blow up the bridge and then murder everyone on their side of the river. And the Russians, in the definition of insanity, keep rebuilding the bridge in the same place and doing it again. So far, during this battle, the Russians have lost the majority of 3 battalion tactical groups worth of armoured vehicles and hundreds of men in the span of 4 days. At that loss rate, that's a brigade a week. Given the circumstances, I think Putin was probably wise in hedging his money on the nuclear deterrent. His conventional forces aren't worth the steel they used to build them. And given we've started seeing some T-72A models and BMP-2 originals, it's very likely that they're using equipment that the Ukrainians themselves built over 40 years ago. Anyway, back on topic, and before we go any further, let's just quickly discuss the order of battle and get it out the way. Although, for those of you who aren't military, an order of battle is the forces available on each side. Right now, Russia has roughly 6,000 nuclear weapons of all types that we know of, while the United States has around 5,500. However, it must be stressed that these weapons are the active nuclear weapons in frontline units, and the ones in the primary reserve, able to be gotten ready quickly in case of a crisis. In reality, both nations have a reserve stockpile. Russia's is of course classified to high hell, as Russian and earlier Soviet state secrets are always classified to high hell, but the highest the US stockpile got in recent times was in 2004, numbering an estimated 13,000 warheads. The START treaties, signed between Russia and the US, were supposed to reduce these numbers, and stockpiles have been reduced on both sides. However, since the resumption of Russian expansionism in 2014, and the aggressive militarist policy of the Trump administration, both Russia and the United States most likely have been keeping their nuclear weapons on hand, and the drawdowns we have seen are simply to make way for more modern systems, replacing outdated ones, such as the new Russian Satan II missile, while the American Minuteman III missiles are currently being modernized to an extent and maintained, while a replacement ICBM is being developed. Now, as someone who loves doing deep dives into the technical nitty-gritty details of weapon systems and how they are used, their advantages and disadvantages, as you've probably seen on some of my other videos, I tend to go a bit autistic on those, given that I am, well, an autist, although that should be obvious. Nukes are rather redundant on that aspect of war, beyond their deployment method, which are, just for those who weren't listening, ICBMs, SLBMs, ALCMs, and SRBMs, as well as conventional gravity bombs, which work exactly like Little Boy and Fat Man. Drop from a plane, hit target, kaboom. But, for the sake of completionism, I shall include a quick montage for you of the systems in use, and I shall set it to the most appropriate of me. Always good to set a cheerful tone, isn't it? Anyway, let's ruin it. What I'm going to show you, or what the following sequence is not going to be me talking. Instead, it's going to be a scenario presented in the way of a 1980s movie discussing nuclear war, very famous one called Threads, which I highly recommend you watch. This is going to be a fictional scenario, as of course, well, we're still here. Most likely, things won't get to this point, and it's going to be a little bit melodramatic just for, reasons. I don't know exactly what's going to happen in a nuclear war. None of us do. But in the game of hypotheticals, using the model from various studies on the topic, what follows is my approximation of World War III.
Пострел!
Расчет внимания, получен приказ по совместным действиям.
Фиксирую время при получении приказа. Есть
По
приготовиться.
совместным действиям.
Есть приготовиться. Совместно.
Второе внимание.
Есть внимание.
Передача.
Есть передача. Есть донесение.
Опросить донесение пусковых установок.
Есть опрашиваю.
Я что хочу сказать, что я студентка, я недавно работаю, я очень многого не знаю.
И наши парни, солдаты и офицеры проявляют мужество и героизм, делают все, что от них зависит, чтобы избежать потерь среди мирного населения украинских городов. Киевским властям по разным каналам с целью избежать бессмысленного кровопролития было предложено не вступать в боевые действия, а просто вывести свои войска из Донбасса. Не захотели. Ну что же, это их решение.
Aqui. Pela numeração, parece haver entre 100 e 150 deles já aqui.
Mongo's locked. That's in the area. Wheel section, stand by for BID. Coming down my note, right side, Mach. Mongo's down. One. Right back. Good sniff. Kill. Fox 1. Up, that's good. Fox 2. Kill.
In a total nuclear exchange, it is estimated that 500 million human lives will end within the first 3 days. This is from the bombs themselves, or from acute radiation sickness and fallout. Millions more will be horribly burned or blinded by the flashes, eventually succumbing to their injuries or radiation poisoning. Within a month, over 1 billion people will be gone. The soil kicked into the air by the bombs will block out the sun, causing Earth to rapidly cool, while radiation contamination is carried by the wind currents over the globe, destroying agriculture and poisoning both the water and the livestock. Human civilization, such as it is, will cease to exist. By the end of 2023, half of humanity is gone, if not more, while the rest descend into enclaves of survival, holding on to what little remains. And things will never be the same. Yeah. Nuclear war is a downer, huh? But you know, it'll never happen. It couldn't happen. No one would ever let it happen. Right? Well, let's hope so. In any case, if it does, there's nothing you or I can do about it, save let it happen. And most likely, afterwards, the living will envy the dead. And so, in honour of that spirit of cheerful fatalist optimism, I shall leave you with one more song, and remind you of an important message I mentioned before. Stop worrying, and learn to love the bomb.
Love that bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
I got a strange love for that bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
Not the tiny toy from World War I.
This one is 1,000,000 times more fun.
Love that bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
I got a strange love for that bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
Not the burst of joy from World War II.
This'll keep you laughing your whole life through.
Strange love. I got a strange love for that bomb. Love that bomb. What a sweet sensation.
Just push the little button for complete annihilation.
Love that bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
I got a strange love for that bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
I can hardly wait till World War III. Here's the way we think it's gonna be.